Hey everybody, it's Val from Autistic Interpretations. It's time for another Q&A. In today's Q&A, I'm going to talk about Jessica's diagnosis of epilepsy. Jessica was first diagnosed with epilepsy when she was 5 years old. So that would have been 1992-ish. The way it all played out back then, we were in the process of still trying to get Jessica's autism diagnosis. And during one of her assessments, I was asked if she had seizures, to which I said, no, she didn't, because nobody had ever asked me that. Nobody had ever insinuated that they thought she might. It kind of came out of the blue. So we were set up to go to a neurologist to get an EEG and check into that. And much to our surprise, she actually was having seizures. What he told us way back then, things have changed a lot, but what he told us back then was that she had petit mal seizures, also known as absence seizures, or if you're a doctor, you might say absence seizures. He said that she was having multiple seizures per minute and that they lasted only a few seconds each one, and that it would in terms of how it affected her and communication and receiving information from the outside world, it would be like if she was listening to somebody count to 10, she would hear them say something like 1, 2, 5, 6, 9, 10. So she would just be missing these moments and not even realize that she missed them. It just was, that seemed like that would be how it would seem to her. So she went on medication and was on medication for seizures for a good while. Back then, they started her off on Tegretol, which worked really nicely for her. Then one year, at some point, she was put on another medication for an infection of some kind. Those two medications didn't go together. They had a bad interaction. And so she got really sick. We didn't know what was wrong with her. We had to take her to the emergency room. She was very lethargic, vomiting. It almost presented itself as a shunt malfunction. But it turned out it was that. And she came off the Tegretol at that point, which probably she shouldn't have. I don't remember why the decision was made. But she came off the Tegretol and we went on to, I think, valproic acid at that point. So over the years, we would check on seizures. We would occasionally do EEGs, and I don't even recall at what point she stopped taking seizure medication for the first time. I have no recollection of that at all. But I think we just felt like she had gotten to the point where we kind of weaned her off of it and she was doing okay. And then when she was a teenager, I noticed one day when she got up in the morning that she looked like she was tremoring. It almost looked like she was shivering. And but it was just a little bit different than just a shiver. I mean, it really was more like a tremor. And I noticed it on a couple of different occasions when she was real sleepy, real tired. So I took her to the doctor and I said, hey, I think maybe she's having seizures. I'm not sure because these look different than the other seizures completely. And we did a new EEG, and sure enough, she was having seizures. They did not call it petit mal anymore. They didn't call them absent seizures. I think at this point they diagnosed her with a partial complex or something seizure. By then, we had some new generation seizure medications on the market that we tried. And Jessica had some, her reaction to them, she had a lot of behavior issues. And I can't remember the specifics of what we tried. And so we just didn't keep it up. It wasn't worth it. Because we consulted with another neurologist. We went to Atlanta to a pediatric neurologist who felt like she didn't have to have seizure medication. So we didn't stay on seizure medication. Later, something came up again. We got a new opinion again. They tried medication again. And once again, she had very, very significant behavior issues. And I just quit giving her the medication. Mainly because her seizures are so invisible that, you know, when people ask me what her seizures look like, they're so difficult to detect. They're like a pause. So if she was talking and then all of a sudden she just stopped and then she started back up. That's kind of what her seizures look like. Sometimes it's a little more gradual than that. So she'll be talking or something and then she just kind of slows down a little bit and then there's nothing. But she doesn't fall down. She doesn't have, you know, any jerking kind of motion. She doesn't get rigid. She's not lethargic necessarily when she's on the other side of it. These are just momentary things that happen. Sometimes her eyes kind of look up and drift a little bit. We see these moments in her frequently, but we don't know if those are seizures or if it's just related to the organic structure of her brain, which is different than mine and yours. And it could be related to that. When we went to the neurologist the other day for a consultation, because it's been a while, you know, one of his things before he looked at her history was he was surprised that she was diagnosed with seizures, even given the abnormalities of her brain structure. So I thought nobody ever said that to me before. So that was interesting. I mean, I guess because her brain is so different, her EEG is going to look different than everybody else's no matter what, whether it's a seizure or not a seizure. Which that made me question past readings about, well, was she really having seizures or was she really not having seizures? It kind of gave me a little more understanding as to why the one neurologist in Atlanta said she's okay without medication. But then I had him, you know, I told him her records were there at that hospital where we were visiting that day. And he went and looked at them and came back and said, yes, she actually was having seizures, focal seizures, one specific place. So definitely was having seizures on her last EEG. So based on the oral history I gave and based on him looking at an old EEG, he thinks it's a good idea for her to try seizure medication again. And so we are going forward with trying medication, even though she's not scheduled for another EEG until the end of January, just because that's the first appointment we could get. So we're going to try this medication that has very low behavioral side effects. It is a medication that is sometimes used off-label for some other things. So even if she's not having seizure activity, it would be okay. But most likely she's having seizures. You know, a story that I told a long time ago, I've told this story when I made the Q&A video about why and when we learned Jessica needed a wheelchair. So if you haven't seen that video, you might want to go watch it. But we had an occasion where we were on a trip very far out of town in Washington, D.C. for the day, and Jessica had a seizure, and it left her very wiped out, unable to walk, exhausted. You know, we're in the middle of DC and we have the other two kids and we had a whole day planned and we weren't able to continue on our day. I mean, we did a few more things and then we had to leave to go home because we had no way of, we didn't have a wheelchair. We didn't have a stroller or anything like this. Jessica would have been maybe 12 or 13. So my point is to say that sometimes Jessica does have seizures that make her tired, that make her fatigued. And then the more fatigued you are, the more likely you are to have seizures. When not just, when you're sleepy, you're more likely, but also physical exertion. And so when we go to Disney and Jessica's in a wheelchair, that's a huge, huge part of it. Jessica gets fatigued very easily, and that's part of the reason why. So, of course, now that I have a son who's in neurology, I got to have a really nice, long educational conversation with him after Jessica's appointment. And he talked to me a lot about seizures, and we talked about the difference in the different types of seizures and what they're called and why. In a seizure that most of us would call a grand mal seizure, they're also called tonic-clonic seizures. Those seizures are on both sides of the brain. So it might start on one side and go to the other side, or it might start on both sides. Jessica does not have that kind of seizure. Jessica has a seizure that starts on one side. Her seizures originate on her right side of her brain, and there have probably been a couple times that we know of that probably she had more a more serious seizure than what we see on a daily basis. Some types of seizures are genetic. Some are related to illness. Some are related to brain structure. Anyway, there's a lot of information on seizures out there. I don't know most of it. I know the basics. But the bottom line is Jessica's seizures are not easy to detect. They're not the kind that make her lose consciousness. The biggest effect we see from her having seizures is this disconnection. She'll stop speaking. She will stop responding to us talking to her. She kind of stops her movement, but she doesn't stop altogether. And the reason for that, people get confused by that, is because it is just from one spot. It's just one side of the brain. And so it's not like the whole brain is seizing. It's just from this one place. So she still can move. She can still sort of talk sometimes. In videos, sometimes you may see her where she pauses, or where I have to say something to her a few times to get her to react again. It's those moments where, like when she's having a seizure and I'm talking to her, I can say, I'll be saying something and I can see that she may be having a seizure, and I'll say, Jessica. And I'll say it several times, and she'll finally say, what? And then we'll continue our conversation. So it's that simple in terms of its presentation. Hope this has satisfied a little bit of curiosity. Please ask me any specific questions about this topic that you have. I'm happy to answer. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer. And maybe I'll ask my son to make a video about it, to kind of explain it a little more in depth, and get a video posted of that. That might be helpful. I'm sure he can explain it a million times better than me. So anyway, Jessica was diagnosed with epilepsy when she was 5. She's been on and off of medication through her life. And part of the reason for that is because her presentation is so mild. It seems to have such a little effect on her. But in the grand scheme of things, just it's better for her to be on medication if she doesn't have a lot of side effects from the medication. Thanks for listening. Bye.